Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 272. Chapter 272. 23 soldiers, 3 officers, and 2 officials were confined in the shed in which Pierre had been placed and where he remained for 4 weeks. When Pierre remembered them afterwards, they all seemed misty figures to him, except Platon Karatsiev, who always remained in his mind a most vivid and precious memory, and the personification of everything Russian, kindly, and round. When Pierre saw his neighbor next morning at dawn, the first impression of him, as of something round, was fully confirmed. Planton's whole figure, in a French overcoat girdled with a cord, a soldier's cap, and bast shoes, was round. His head was quite round, his back, chest, shoulders, and even his arms, which he held as if ever ready to embrace something, were rounded. His pleasant smile and his large, gentle brown eyes were also round. Platon Karatsiev must have been 50, judging by his stories of campaigns he had been in, told as by an old soldier. He did not himself know his age, and was quite unable to determine it. But his brilliantly white, strong teeth, which showed in 2 unbroken semicircles when he laughed, as he often did, were all sound and good. There was not a gray hair in his beard, or on his head, and his whole body gave an impression of suppleness, and especially of firmness and endurance. His face, despite its fine, rounded wrinkles, had an expression of innocence and youth. His voice was pleasant and musical, but the chief peculiarity of his speech was its directness and appositeness. It was evident that he never considered what he had said or was going to say, and consequently the rapidity and justice of his intonation had an irresistible persuasiveness. His physical strength and agility during the first days of his imprisonment were such that he seemed not to know what fatigue and sickness meant. Every night before lying down, he said, "Lord, lay me down as a stone and raise me up as a loaf." And every morning on getting up, he said, "I lay down, and curled up, I get up and shake myself." And indeed, he only had to lie down, to fall asleep like a stone, and he only had to shake himself, to be ready without a moment's delay for some work, just as children are ready to play directly when they awake. He could do everything, but not very well, and also not very badly. He baked, cooked, sewed, planed, and mended boots. He was always busy, and only at night allowed himself conversation, of which he was fond, and songs. He did not sing like a trained singer who knows he is listened to, but like the birds, evidently giving vent to the sounds in the same way that one stretches oneself, or walks about to get rid of a kind of stiffness. And the sounds were always high-pitched, mournful, delicate, and almost feminine, and his face at such times was very serious. Having been taken prisoner and allowed his beard to grow, he seemed to have thrown off all that had been forced upon him, everything military and alien to himself, and had returned to his former peasant habits. "A soldier on leave, a shirt outside breeches," he would say. He did not like talking about his life as a soldier, though he did not complain, and often mentioned that he had not been flogged once during the whole of his army service. When he related anything, it was generally some old and evidently precious memory of his Christian life, as he called his peasant existence. The proverbs, of which his talk was full, were for the most part not the coarse and indecent saws soldiers employ, but those folk sayings, which taken without a context seem so insignificant, but when used appositely, suddenly acquire a significance of profound wisdom. He would often say the exact opposite of what he had said on a previous occasion, yet both would be right. He liked to talk, and he talked well, adorning his speech with terms of endearment and with folk sayings which Pierre thought he invented himself. But the chief charm of his talk lay in the fact that the commonest events, sometimes just such as Pierre had witnessed without taking notice of them, assumed in Karatiev's a character of solemn fitness. He liked to hear the folk tales one of the soldiers used to tell of an evening. They were always the same. But most of all, he liked to hear stories of real life. He would smile joyfully when listening to such stories, now and then putting in a word or asking a question to make the moral beauty of what he was told clear to himself. Karatiev had no attachments, friendships, or love, as Pierre understood them, but loved and lived affectionately with everything life brought him in contact with, particularly with man. Not any particular man, but those with whom he happened to be. He loved his dog, his comrades, the French, and Pierre, who was his neighbor. But Pierre felt that in spite of Karatiev's affectionate tenderness for him, by which he unconsciously gave Pierre's spiritual life its due, he would not have grieved for a moment at parting from him. And Pierre began to feel in the same way towards Karatiev. To all the other prisoners, Platon Karatiev seemed a most ordinary soldier. They called him Little Falcon, or Platosha, chaffed him good-naturedly, and sent him on errands. But to Pierre, he always remained what he had seemed that first night, an unfathomable, rounded, eternal personification of the spirit of simplicity and truth. Platon Karatiev knew nothing by heart except his prayers. When he began to speak, he seemed not to know how he would conclude. Sometimes Pierre, struck by the meaning of his words, would ask him to repeat them, but Platon could never recall what he had said a moment before, just as he could never repeat to Pierre the words of his favorite song. Native in birch tree and my heart is sick occurred in it, but when spoken and not sung, no meaning could be gotten out of it. He did not and could not understand the meaning of words apart from their context. Every word and action of his was the manifestation of an activity unknown to him, which was his life. But his life, as he regarded it, had no meaning as a separate thing. It had meaning only as part of a whole, of which he was always conscious. His words and actions flowed from him as evenly, inevitably, and spontaneously as fragrance exhales from a flower. He could not understand the value or significance of any word or deed taken separately. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 272. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 272. Round. That Pierre associates Platon Karatiev with roundness is one of the great ironies of War and Peace. Platon Karatiev is the least developed, least multidimensional character in a book filled with more dimensions than an LSD party thrown by the world's wildest theoretical physicists. We meet Platon a good man, and later, sadly, we leave him a good man. This isn't to say that Platon Karatiev is a bad character. It's just that his purpose is different from the other characters in the book. Broadly, Platon's role is to serve as Pierre's stoic sage during Pierre's imprisonment, an example of how to negotiate hardship. The first lesson Platon imparts is that one must accentuate the good, even in a bad situation. They're definitely in a bad situation. Yet, from Pierre's observations, Platon doesn't seem to be aware of it. Platon often laughs, maintains a youthful countenance, and articulates his words of wisdom in a pleasant, musical voice. For Pierre, this makes Platon the personification of everything Russian, kindly, and round. Their miserable journey together as prisoners of the French is just getting started. Pierre would do well to pay close attention to Platon Karatiev. We all would. Daily meditation. It is the nature of every soul to assent to the truth. to dissent from the false, and to remain in suspense as to that which is uncertain. So it is its nature to be moved towards the desire of the good, and to aversion from the evil. And with respect to that which is neither good nor bad, it feels indifferent. Epictetus, The Discourses. That concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 272 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me today. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow, we will be reading and reflecting on chapter 273. I hope you join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.